All right, here we go. Theoretically, let's make sure everything's synced up before we start doing anything else. My encoder is connected. Please, thank you. There we go. Dismiss that. Set to live. Sure both are synced up. Okay. Hello, that was fast. All right, we're going to wait a few minutes for everyone to show up. I'll probably repeat this, but for anyone who's already here somehow, however many of you remember, plenty of you have been around for a few years of this at this point. The gray bars are never correct. They're extrapolations, and whenever they actually input the data on sites like TD Economics, the actual blue bar with the real data ends up being different. I'll repeat that in a few minutes for people who show up later. Also, remember that everybody has paywalls now. So 10 years is the best you can see on these. If you try to go beyond that, you get a paywall. So I can't show you long-term stuff on any of the sites anymore. And if you try to get those graphs that would just pop up when you Google searched something, like, for example, China GDP, instead of the Google graph that you would normally appear here, now you get their stupid AI thing. There's no Google autograph that even pops up anymore. So everything is now through paywall websites, except for the Maxogir data, where you can get stuff through the Google Drive folder. I don't have, well, technically you can look at population data through the population projections because that also contains the previous 50 years of population data. For the GDP stuff, I only have GDP adjusted for inflation. For regular nominal face value GDP, I don't have graphs of that yet. I'll try to make those now. But population and demographics, if you want non-paywall graphs, you can come in here. These include projections out to sometimes 2100, out to sometimes 2075. But obviously, you can figure out where 2026 is. Hopefully, I'm assuming you have eyes and you know how to read. So you can figure out where, and then you can see what happened in the past. So I'm sorry, that's the best that's available now. Now that everything's going behind a paywall on every website everywhere, and like I said, there's the economic data for GDPs. I only have the inflation adjusted GDPs. So what's the economic size of said country was, what the value of their economic activity was in 2025 dollars. Actually, technically, this is 2024 dollars. So I'm gonna have to go back and adjust all of these again. To now that it's 2026, I'll have to adjust them to 2026 dollars. So I don't have nominal value, face value GDP, which is what you're going to see on sites like tdeconomics.com. Although that's population. So GDP, you'll be seeing nominal. There are some sites that have it inflation adjusted. However, those sites are now also putting the data behind paywalls. So I'll get around to it. I promise I'll get around to everything. But remember, you can find stuff through the Google Drive. You can see the population data via the population projections because those also include 50 years of past population data up to present. And you can unfortunately only see inflation adjusted GDP data up to 2024 dollars because I failed to update it last year because I was lazy. I'll update it this year and I'll start a regular uh, set of GDP graphs. So as I said, I'd repeat for anyone just showing up now after the first few minutes. And if you go to any sites, the gray unupdated bars are never correct. They're always wrong because they're just running on extrapolations. When they actually input the updated data, the the actual now to be blue bar will always be something different than what the gray bar was. There's been a few rare exceptions, and they've been kind of unpredictable. as to which countries get like accurate preset gray bars. But also, as to why I was linking the Google Drive stuff for anyone who's unaware, on a lot of the data websites where you could get a lot of this public stuff, like TD Economics was one of the best ones. You can only see back 10 years now. If you try to go back further than that, you hit a paywall. So I apologize for that. I'm going to bring up the world map via the Bathmagic viewer just so I can give you some kind of thing to look at, I guess. Hold on, let me shut down the excess stuff so it doesn't lag us. And we use this now because Google Earth always lags the stream. So I'm sorry it's not as pretty as Google Earth, but we'll live. Okay, let's see. Who's here? 2 people. Well, 2 people speaking. 8 people present. Is that enough to start? Maybe. Give me a second. Let me chug some water. Then I'll make up my mind. Congestion always strikes. All right. So I'll start in a second. Before we start, for the yearly income map, since blah blah blah, when I lived back up home in Alaska, I was able to live off of only $8 grand a year. There's about 8 billion people on the planet now, plus. So I figure $1 per million people. We'll see if Patreon ad revenue and super chats, PayPal stuff, everything combined. We'll see if we can get a year where we actually get up to the population, which would roughly equal out to my previous backup home yearly living costs. So stuff that everybody has super chatted in the past week or so, plus the Patreon from December, uh, is going towards this year because I don't find out what that is till the end of each month. So December for each year will go towards the next year. Technically, was enough to save home Alaska, Angola, Namibia, Lithuania, and Kazakhstan from the end of the world, and the ad revenue broke down to just enough to save Colombia from the apocalypse as well. So let's see if we can actually save the entire human population. But anyways, it is time now. So we're going to go in order of economic size and in order of economic size, and I'll then address the population as well. We're not doing all 197 countries because we'd be here forever. We're going to do a lot of them, and I did not finish the population data for all of them in time, so I apologize if your country does not have everything complete. But anyways, we have to fix EpicPen. Where is it? Okay, so there, we do that. Just do it what? In reference to what? Okay, so US was going up and had the COVID stop like everybody else, start going up again. Has been slowing down and had a sudden uptick this year, or this past year now, because 2025 is now the past year, and went from an economic size of $29.1 trillion up to $30.6 trillion. However, 80% of that was just from inflated stock market valuation from AI investment. So the roughly estimated actual economic growth from actual things happening and, people spending actual money and not just gambling on Wall Street it still went up, but only behind the AI curtain, it went up from 29.1 up to either 29.4 or $29.5 trillion. Population wise, US went from 341.1 or 0.2, it was roughly in between them, up to basically a flat 343 million at the start of the year. On other trajectories, it would have otherwise gone up to 343 and a half, but under the current administration and the attitudes that has produced, and the fear that has produced, the number of people canceling their would be otherwise immigration into the US has increased. So the number of people actually fulfilling their otherwise would be entry is dropping. People are deciding to stay where they are and not come. Plus, the U.S. Number of births in the U.S. is continuing to go down while the number of deaths continues to go up. So that produced a 1.8 million population increase instead of the roughly 2.3, 2.4 that it otherwise would have been, which was already on its way down. Previously, it was roughly, for a few decades, it was a solid just over 3 million per year, and the number increase per year was already on its way down and would have been down at about 2.4 or 2.3. But now, because of the switched attitude, this year ended up only 1.8. So, US as of the start of this year was just over 343 million. Swinging over to China. China, once hit the very end of the 2010s, COVID combined, but then restoring from that, they've kind of stayed around 18 trillion solidly. It kind of stagnated and stopped growing. They've inched up a little bit over 2024 and 2025 from 18 up to over 19. Now coming in this year at 19.4 trillion in total. And some of that on their end is some AI stuff, not as lopsided as the US one. Theirs was only like uh third out of like $500 billion of increased economic size, something like 30% of it was AI slop related. And population wise, uh last year, remember at the start of last year, they fell from 1.40 or 1.41 down to 1.407. They even actually published that data until they abruptly and panickedly redacted that and said, no, we only dropped to 1.408. So in reality, over the course of this year, they dropped to, or sorry, over the course of last year, they dropped to likely between 1.403 and 1.404, probably closer to 403 in terms of billions. And in terms of what they'll actually publish, I would assume this year, since they've adapted a USSR style of lying where they lie believably, but still want to at least try to pretend their population is not going down as quickly. So they'll probably, running off of the 1.408 false claim, they're probably going to claim that they only went down to 1.405, or if they're bold, they might even say they only went down to 1.406. We'll have to wait and see. By the end of this year, though, by the end of 2026, they will be under 1.4 billion. Meanwhile, India has not hit the stagnation that China hit, but they are slowing down in their economic growth. They were going up pretty fast. They were doing what China was over a decade ago. They were going up by like 10% per year. They have slowed down a little bit, or technically by like 40%. The previous year they slowed down to they grew by a bit over 8%, and this year or last year technically they grew by between 6 and 7%, as they went from just under 3.9 up to just over 4.1. We'll do a little up arrow there. Just over $4.1 trillion of economic size for India now. And as India's birth rate continues to decline and their lower end of their pyramid continues to indent, and they also, what was it for? No, sorry. How do we do the dudes versus chicks thing? You do like this, yeah, and you have the weird alien arms for the dude. This is how the bathroom symbols work. And then for chicks, it's like you just have the dress and then the alien arms. So for India, they're also starting to quickly have a similar issue to China, and that is seeing a lopsided, not like extreme, but one that's going to cause problems. On their lower end of people who were born in the last like 15 years, they're seeing more males than females, which is what China has also seen, which is usually indicative of selective abortion, of the families uh, choosing to only have the kid if it's a boy, which enhances demographic issues further down the line. For a population itself, India ended 2024 just under 1.4 billion, and they have continued increasing up as they're down to around or a bit under 12 million people per year, and will soon be at 11 and then 10, obviously, and then going down and down. So they, as of the start of this year, are up to 1.409, possibly slightly a little bit higher at 1.41 flat, but they're not in the obscene, ridiculous range that you'll see a lot of population clock websites claim them to be, which will be at like 1.7 or some nonsense. For those of you who are unfamiliar with population clocks, they're the websites that show you ridiculous nonsense. Like here, hold on, population clock. Like this is the one that everyone uses. I assure you, this data is nowhere near correct. These are just running on mathematical algorithms that are not really adjusted. Like this one, Worldometers was adjusted in 2020, so 6 years ago. And in case you haven't guessed, things have kind of changed drastically in just the last 6 years. So, global population at the moment is roughly, most likely around 8.15 to maybe 8.16. I should probably check chat. Here, I could wait for what? You can wait for what? Why am I getting just do it and I can wait? What is everybody waiting for? Germany, Deutschland had a jump. They've been jumping from population influx, increasing consumer spending, and uh, from contracting and unfortunately some AI stuff as well, inflating things. So there's going to be some backtracking on that. But they went up uh, from the upper fours, around 4.7 or 4.8, up to just over by a few billion, just over $5 trillion of economic size. And they, if I'm recalling correctly, they've been there before, and so has Japan. They both gone like up and down because both of them kind of hit stagnation in nominal terms. over the last decade or two, although Japan, in inflation adjusted terms, peaked in early 1990s at an economic value equivalent to 10 trillion in today's money, and their economic size is now only like 4.5 trillion in today's exact money. But a lot of that has to do with their heavily aged population. Not that Germany's that far away from facing that itself. Population wise, you scroll down to Deutschland. Where are you on the sheet? Where are you? There you are. Germany actually declined a bit as we're seeing the pattern, the back and forth pattern, which messes with my population projections because I need people to be consistent. So the majority of with the exception of Spain at the moment, the majority of the immigration mass influx countries that post COVID did a sudden upsurge of allowance of additional hundreds of thousands per year are now reneging on that and suddenly putting much steeper caps than they actually even had in place before that. So Germany uh, barely had a net influx, and also the economies of other locales, particularly Central Europe and even portions of Eastern Europe, have gotten so much better than they once were to the point that now more people, especially Poles and Czechs and Slovaks, for example, are more people are returning to their home countries each year in the case of those nations than the number of people that are entering Germany. So the influx to Germany from within Europe, at least, is now outside of people from Ukraine. It's primarily going to be people from the Balkans and Greece. But Germany was at 83.6 at the start of last year, and net overall declined down to 83.5 million as of the start of this year. Then we go back over to Japan, Nihon. In Japan, what did you do? Where are your numbers? There you are. They had a bounce back. They'd been declining a bit down to 4.5. And during 2024, they had an abrupt contraction down to only about 4. Over the course of 2025, they had a rebound back up to just over $4.4 trillion of economic size. And population wise, Japan is continuing to decline, as I'm sure everyone is aware it has been doing. And the decline has hit its steeper point as when you pass over a curve, you start slow, but then you eventually hit your somewhat linear looking slope, and they've hit theirs roughly as this year or last year. Sorry, I'm going to keep making that mistake. We're only 5 days in. As last year, over the course of 2025, they lost a total of 1 million people for the first time, as the number of people they declined by in total had been like getting up there over the early 2020s. It was like 860,000, then 910,000, then 940,000. Last year, the total was over 1 million for the first time, just barely, but it was over 1 million. They went from 123.2 down to, at the start of this year, 122.2 million people in Japan. So that pattern continues. Let's see. All right, going by economics and then covering population afterwards. The UK is continuing on it. Excuse me, is continuing on its financial financial maneuvering and stock inflated upturn, which is why this is kind of not seen in any kind of like outward benefits to the non-London population of the United Kingdom. So they had another sudden upsurge from 3.64 up to 3.96 trillion. But a lot of that is coming from inflated stock value, which is also, piggybacking itself off of the AI surge, a lot of which is concentrated in the US, but it does have knockoff effects elsewhere. And the UK is nearing 70 million, although over 2025 it drastically cut down its immigrant intake, as has been the knee-jerk reaction pattern or the rubber band reaction pattern of many countries. So the UK, while the 2 years prior it went up in total by like 600,000 people each year, over the course of 2025, the UK only increased by about 200,000, from 69.3 up to 69.5 million. But even with the decreased intake numbers, the UK is still going to end up peaking above 70. In the multiple different level scenarios, I usually still have them peaking around like 72 or 73, unless, again, this is the caveat, unless they do a sudden like inward allowance upsurge again, like they did in 2022 and 2023. But again, I can't predict those, so don't hold those over my head. And then just below them, geographically and economically, is France, who is having renewed economic growth, but in more natural numbers, growing from 3.16 over 2025 up to 3.21 trillion in economic size. Continuing, some part is continuing on the Airbus boom, since Boeing has continued committing corporate suicide or brand reputation suicide by building planes with autopilots that just ram the plane into the ground, and failing to actually properly construct planes, and then literally assassinating anyone who tries to whistleblow about the quality issues. So many orders have been getting deferred from Boeing over to Airbus instead, which France is benefiting from, along with other participant nations in that, Spain, Netherlands, etc. Along with the Trump attitude of the U.S. now, a lot of people have been starting to switch their weapon manufacturer preference. And so companies like Thales in France, who manufacture a lot of things like similar to what Raytheon does in the US, are now getting a lot of deferred orders, wanting their weaponry instead. And population-wise, France increased very slightly, as they have cut down their immigration numbers as well. Again, the same knee-jerk reaction. Here, I should draw bigger numbers for chat's sake. They went up from, uncover that. Where's France? There's France. They went up from 68.6, just a bit, to 68.7 million over the course of 2025. And their population peak, which will be a plateau similar to the UK for a couple decades, will most likely end up being around more of a flat 70 instead of in the lower 70s. All right. We get anybody? Okay, but that's beyond that's 10 minutes ago was 10 minutes ago. Oh, damn. We've already been going for half an hour. Okay. I'm going to warn you guys then. I'm sorry, but we are not going to get anywhere near through this list in live format, or the entire list. Not that the list includes all 197 countries, but I'll try to get through as many of the major ones as I can, and then some random favorites. There's a number of there's a number of different causes. I wrote a long essay about that, and in terms of like the modern crash, a lot of the modern crash has to do in the last like 10 or 15 years with the advent of social media and the fact that everyone, both bots and other humans on social media, are just constantly spewing like hateful genocidal rhetoric and stuff. So that is kind of malazing humanity in its entirety into either thinking, or you could view it as truthful realizing that a huge number of the people around them are no internal monologue, morally depraved sociopaths, and that has that has deterred people from wanting to interact romantically with each other altogether, and also even people who are romantically involved with each other now don't want to have kids because they've seen what everyone else in the world is blatantly showing themselves to think and be like, and so they don't want to forcibly create new lives that are going to have to suffer through the wills and whims of such people. That's the reason for the modern super further drop. Because remember, overall, since the Industrial Revolution and then the World Wars and medical advents and double working, it went down like this all the way down to between 2 and 3, depending on in reference to modern countries, and then went down towards like 2. But then it was kind of fine in a lot of places until you hit the 2010s, and then we've done a sudden drop, which then seems to bottom out at different levels in different regions. Uh, the countries in East Asia, China, South Korea, Taiwan, etc., uh, Thailand, Singapore, they seem to bottom out around like 0.7 or 0.8 children per woman, whereas the countries in Europe that are reaching the bottom, that are suddenly reaching a floor, they seem to stop still above 1 at around 1.1. And Latin American countries, those that have reached a floor, with the exception of Chile, their floor seems to be about 1 itself. And for Middle Eastern countries that have reached a floor, theirs seems like, or are approaching a floor, which predominantly consists of Tunisia and the rich Persian Gulf nations. Their floor seems to be basically the same as Europe, right around 1.1 or so. African nations are still on their way down. We don't know what kind of floor we're going to see with them yet. And the Central Asian republics are on their way down just a lot more slowly than anywhere else in the world. And we, again, don't know where their floor is going to be yet. Okay, continuing down the list, Italy is also getting some boosted income from deferred stuff, some like shipping contracts, especially, and ship making, as companies are trying to again get everything away from China that they can before the Taiwan stuff starts, and also a lot of people are being turned off from the U.S. by present attitudes. And one of the other ship shipping and ship making, everything maritime related countries that can be turned to is Italy. Italy has, after stagnating for a while, has been going up. and they had been crawling up through the twos from around, like from around two itself. They've been making their way up the last 5 or 6 years, or sorry, 5 years, because you have to remember 2020. So post COVID, they've been making their way up through the twos and now have made it up over two and a half to $2.54 trillion. Meanwhile, their population decline continues. They have not hit the steeper part of their slope yet. They are approaching that, but it's going to be another probably 5 years, maybe a bit more before they fully hit it. So they are on the uh, the the transition part of the slope right there. Over the course of 2025, their population declined. Sorry, I'll make the numbers bigger. Their population declined from 58.9 down to 58.7 million. So again, not at the steepest part of decline that it's going to see just yet, but it'll get there. Canada, over to Canada. Canada, continuing continuing to benefit from increased resource extraction, both in minerals and in oil and gas. Uh, their increases were enough to balance out the price decrease in some things, and in total, it was enough to give them a net gain, despite the fact that their total remainder of economy otherwise is kind of a bit stagnant. But they did increase last year in total economic size or value from a 2.24 up to a 2.28 trillion. And they did pretty, not an actual immigration hold, but pretty close to one because of the huge backlash they got, similar to the UK, France, Germany, etc. And so, where did I put them? There they are. Their population did go up over 2025, just by very little, from 41.5 up to 41.6 million. And now I'm going to have to adjust my projection graph again because I have to keep readjusting things for everyone who keeps making, back and forth, erratic decisions. So thanks a lot, Canada. Brazil is continuing with some actual economic growth, actual activity increase. As remember, a number of factories of things have been being brought to Brazil. They're not one of the major destinations for relocation of things from problem locales like China, but they have gotten a few, and those are starting up or started up over 2025, outputting in a number of different products. So orders and profit from transport and logistics and other stuff from those now goes to Brazil instead of formerly China or wherever else. And also their oil production continues increasing, and some of their mineral outputs are continuing to increase as well. They have gone up from 2.18 or 2.18 up to 2.26 trillion in total economic size. And their population, where are they? Their population went up by about between 800 and 900,000. They went from 213.4 up to a bit over 214.2 million. Let's go over to this one. Spain. Had a larger percentage jump, although they have benefited from some real stuff as they're part of like the Airbus integrated stuff, and they do manufacture actually a number of of oil and gas stuff, especially like offshore related stuff. I don't know if they've been getting increased tourism or not lately. They're not one of the ones I actually kept track of. But Spain increased from 1.72 up with a decent surge to $1.89 trillion in economic size. And in terms of population, Spain is one of the ones that has not cut down its intake of people yet. It hasn't had the same knee-jerk reaction that everyone else has. They increased over last year from 49.1 up to a population total of 49.5 million. And who's economically just below them? Mexico. Mexico. They did have a worse year in 2025 because of messed up stuff and everything because of the current US administration. Next year, though, one way or another, no matter who does or doesn't like it, they are going to get a bit of an upsurge because a huge number of the stuff that uh, car car companies, electronics companies like my preferred one, HP, etc., battery manufacturers, all kinds of stuff, machinery, have been relocating from China to Mexico as it's has the infrastructure and has similar factories and everything, but also has cheaper labor than the U.S. Not as cheap as the slave labor they could get in China or India, but it's cheap enough. And a lot of those are going to be starting up their output this year, so that cash flow will then be going through Mexico instead of China. Over 2025, though, Mexico only went from 1.85 up to 1.86 trillion for economic size, and population wise, where are you guys? There you are. Population wise, they went from 130, possibly 131, it's a bit of ambiguity, up to 130.9. And they're likely going to be peaking in the lower 140s. We'll have to wait and see. And before I check chat again, the one other we'll run through before that is the Aussies. Aussies are continuing to go up. Where did you guys go? You guys disappeared. There you are. Okay. Aussies are making their way up with more natural increase levels. Uh, some of that is due to like legitimate overall economic activity increase, but a fair bit of it is due to increased mineral output and the revenue from that. But Australia over 2025 went from 1.75 up to 1.83 for trillion dollars for total economic size. And population wise, where did I put you guys? There you are. Australia has also slowed down, not to the same extent that like the UK, Germany, and France did, but they slowed down, whereas they abruptly in 2022 and 2023, or 2023 and 2024, I'm not sure which pair it was, they were taking in like 700 or 800,000 a year abruptly. They slowed down to lower numbers, and they do still have a natural increase, more births than deaths overall, but that margin is getting pretty narrow for them. Over 2025, they went from 27.4 up to 27.7 million for the total population of Australia. Who else do we have? Uh, Carrying capacity? No, because we're not at our carrying capacity. Not for the world as a whole. There are a number of individual nations and regions that are well beyond their carrying capacity. But a lot of that is regional, which is why one of the when I finally do that how you can help save the world stream, one of the things that I'm going to tell you, and I do apologize if for those who like literally live in a desert country who end up hearing this, one of the biggest things you can do to help save the world is to not live in the desert. Live somewhere that is not a desert, because that is uh, pretty much on the highest end of energy and water intensity and expense in total of maintaining stuff and having to get things there and to stay there that's otherwise are really not meant to. Like Saudi Arabia is, instead of importing food, they still do import a lot of food, but they are straight up just kind of trying to brute force agriculture with like enclosed, instead of enclosed artificial ski slopes like in Dubai, they're doing like enclosed artificially like super cooled reverse greenhouses basically, which kind of eat up gigawatts and gigawatts of power. So please don't live in the desert if you have any kind of option in that, at least. Like if you live in the US, for example, if you live in like Arizona or Nevada, like if you live in Las Vegas or something, get out. Go live in like a normal place. Like literally anywhere else but the desert. Let's see. South Korea. South Korea has kind of been meandering around the upper ones, like between 1.6 and 1.9 for either a decade or a decade and a half. This time, over the course of 2025, they saw a sharper upward rebound from 1.71 up to 1.86 trillion. And this has been basically their norm for the last 15 years. They've been like spiky all over the place like that. But they're not really going up anymore. As discussed in many other streams, overall, we are kind of at the like true value limits of the line in its entirety being able to go up. But the global financial system can't actually handle hearing that. So be careful who you say that to. South Korea, in terms of population, where are they? Uh, where are they? Hold on, trying to find them on the list. Okay, there they are. So South Korea has actually been one of the ones that is more open to receiving inbound immigration. There are surprisingly a lot of Eastern Europeans and Canadians who live and work in South Korea. Weird random fact, but there's a lot of them. There's a lot of people who don't want to live in China for obvious reasons, who live and work in South Korea and would probably prefer to stay there and not go back to China. Other than that, they kind of do operate on the Japanese policy of undisclosed, like it's not actually written down, but there is an unspoken rule of mostly only taking other Asians. But they do have a lot of Eastern Europeans and Canadians for some reason. But other than that, it's a lot of Chinese people who don't want to be in China, and a lot of people from the Philippines and Thailand and etc. South Korea actually takes in quite a bit. They've really been wanting to at least go with that for the time being, rather than watch their total population number enter the full descent it would otherwise be in, like Japan is in right now. They actually went up very slightly over the course of 2025 from 51.7 up to 51.8 million. And the entirety of the gain was from inbound people. As remember, they are South Korea's fertility rate is going back up. It hit a absolute bottom of 0.7 and it has increased back up to 0.75. And based on some of the continuing trend numbers from the final quarter of 2025, if those continue extrapolated out, it might climb back up to 0.8 in 2026 this year. But we'll have to wait and see. Turkey continues its resumed growth after its stall, collapse, and economic chaos for like a decade or so. Turkey has continued on its way upwards and went from 1.32 up to supposedly 1.44 trillion, although that's not finalized just yet. Population wise, after some outflux from people continuing to financially leave Turkey and from continuing expulsions of Kurds, not so covertly, only ones they can really get away with, and also refugees returning to Syria. The stall has slowed down, and they did actually increase in population last year. They went from where is it? Down there, there they are. They went from 85.7 up to 86.1 million. And they're likely going to peak around 90 or in the very low 90s. And next after them, we have Indonesia, who is continuing at roughly a 3 to 4% economic growth rate per year. Over 2025, they went from 1.4 up to 1.44 trillion. And population wise, they went from 284.9 up to 287.3. So that's an increase of 2.4. Their increase rate has been going down. The number they go up by, I think at the highest I remember it was like 3.3 per year. And so the number they increase by each year as their fertility rate has gone down quickly as well, has declined now to about 2.4 over the course of 2025. And over the course of this year, it'll probably be either 2.3 or maybe only 2.2. So that's why they're probably going to peak around like 310 or in the 300 and teens. And then, before I check chat again, we will cover Nederland. Nederland has also benefited from the great Boeing exodus as they are part of the Airbus chain as well, and from both U.S. and China shipping related stuff being deferred, and some weapons manufacturing preference changes as well. As they do manufacture some stuff, they're just a lot quieter about it than some others are. They took a jump in 2025 from 1.23 up to its opposite, up to 1.32 trillion. And for population size, oh, I have to go on the back of the page. Netherlands is small in terms of population. They went from 18.04 up to 18.19 million. So the Nederland has not stopped or slowed down its intake yet. But then again, they have not had the same kind of like massive political backlash about it that's the UK, Germany, and France have. For example, uh, a lot of uh, a lot of the political anger in Nederland has primarily been from farmers not getting enough government subsidies. That's usually been like the primary thing that you see coming out of there. Check chat. Blah blah blah. Social. Uh, I don't really know how to even like address that angle. I have never thought about anything remotely regarding social hierarchy, but I also have almost no friends or associates anymore. Like Josh, the obligatory black guy slash my only mod of the chat. He is also my only remaining friend, actually. In terms of ignoring the politeness with which you usually will refer to anyone you speak to on a regular basis as a friend, taking what you should regard as the genuine definition of a friend, Josh is my only remaining friend. Okay, let's see. Uh, for economic numbers, Russia has gone hog wild and is just saying whatever now. So around they were around like 1.8 or 1.7, so we'll say middle ground. And then they, contracted after starting the war and kind of believably said at first in believable terms that they went up a little bit based on boosted prices that overwrote the production decrease. But then, uh, as their production went down and the prices have come back down over time, and as their gas exports have gone to zero, and their other exports are quickly heading to zero, and everything they sell has to be at a discount, and internal spending, their internal consumer spending has been down spiraling, and the amount of financial stuff is going down because the amount of people defaulting on their loans is up. The amount of businesses defaulting on their loans is around like 20% now. That, even with those prices adjusted, should put them down below 1.5 somewhere. However, they claimed at the start of last year that they were like above 2, and now at the start of this year are claiming that they're so epically awesome that they jumped all the way up to 2.5. That actually their economy in 2025, I guess, grew by over 20%, which even if you just factor in like the desperate military expenditure, that does not even still come anywhere close to that. So we're past the point where they're just making up whatever. Just like with the fertility rates and the population and the random like weekly claims of and they've done this multiple times, like claims of killing like 30,000 NATO troops in Ukraine every day somehow. And what was the best one? The best one they ever tried selling? Oh yeah, it was that NATO was sending troops to Ukraine, and they were gay black Polish mercenaries because that's a thing that exists. So they're somewhere around maybe 1.5 if we're being generous. Population wise, they were a bit above 142 at the start of 2025. At the end, they going by their regular rates and the accrued deaths in Ukraine, they're most likely in the lower 141 range, probably 141 and a half, maybe as low as 141.3. We won't really get to see the truth until probably the 2029 to 2032 range. Uh, when we eventually get sort of a reset and retroactive correction of data. Saudi Arabia, primarily getting a boost from the fact that they returned to from 9 up to their 10 million barrel per day plateau, but being weighed down by the fact, obviously, that the prices have gone down. So, not as big of a jump as it otherwise would have been, but they have gotten boosted slightly from 1.24 up to 1.27. And population wise, where are they? They are right there. Uh, they they reached the end of their renewed mass import of primarily Bangladeshi and Pakistani slave labor. Uh, and for those wondering about the slave labor thing, it's they both Saudi Arabia and the UAE and Qatar all do this. They offer like high paying jobs from the perspective of Pakistani or Bangladeshi incomes, and they attract a bunch of those people to come and work. When they arrive, they immediately seize those people's passports and all documents and kind of get forced into signing a document, a kangaroo court esque document legalizing their indenturement for like the next decade. And they have to live like 20 people in basically something the size of one average US bedroom. And they work like 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. So it is just slavery. Like you can't really get around it. It's just slavery. So and it also helps them politically boost their population, which countries always like saying they have a larger population. It makes them feel better. So they're done with their renewed mass importation, where they were importing like a 800,000 more people a year. They're still bringing some in, but they're down closer to what their natural increase would otherwise be. So they went up from, let me find them again. There they are. They went up from 35.3 up to 35.6 million over the course of 2025. Whereas the number of people that should actually live in Saudi Arabia is maybe 5 million if I'm being generous. Going back to the whole carrying capacity argument. And then Poland, Polska, has had an upsurge from all of the manufacturing and tech stuff, steel orders, weapons manufacturing, everything, all kinds of stuff that's been relocated to Poland and deferred through Poland. But a lot of tech stuff and manufacturing things that have been relocated either A, out of China for safety or for dilution of concentration of the global supply chain. like a semiconductor manufacturing plant has just started up in Poland. One just started up in Turkey as well, and another one is under construction in Deutschland. But as Deutschland continues deindustrializing itself, like the UK did over the course of a few decades, Germany is speedrunning that process, however. And a lot of that stuff has been relocating to Poland and Polska. In Polska, a lot of the stuff started up last year. So that saw sudden bulk orders and revenue surge, which carried them from around 914 billion up to just over by a couple billion, just over 1 trillion in economic size. So Polska has entered the 1 trillion club. Everybody sound off the party noisemaker things. And population wise, Poland is continuing its decline. Over the course of 2025, they went from 37.5 down to a little bit above 37.3. Different sources varied. It was like between 37.32 and 37.35. So a little bit above 37.3. And then Switzerland, just sitting on everybody's gold and jewelry, got an abrupt lunge upwards from 937 up to also just over 1 trillion. I don't recall if Switzerland has been in the 1 trillion club before. Let me check. Remember, the gray bar does not represent anything. It's an extrapolation based on an algorithm. It doesn't look like they have. Not that we can go back further than 25. And population-wise, did I get Switzerland in time? It looks like I did not. Okay, sorry, Switzerland. Sucks to be you, I guess. Kazakhstan. They're not next down on the list, but they are in the middle of the notepad here. So we're jumping down to them because they just happen to be in the middle. After Switzerland, I'm not sure what's going on, but they crossed over 300 million. They went from 200 or billion, sorry, from 288 up to 301 billion total economic size over 2025. And population wise, they continued climbing from 20.3 up to 20.5 million. And then back up on the actual order that the ladder goes in, we have Taiwan, who has continued its base. They've been pretty solid over the course of time with their upward economic size growth. They've been pretty solid about it. I mean, once they started in like the late 70s and early 80s, they initially went for a big upward swing, but after that, they went into more of like a pretty stable, solid, not necessarily linear, but close to linear climb. And they went from 914 up to $923 billion of economic value over last year. They're starting to get dragged down by the fact that their population is also heading downwards, with them continuing to decline. Where did I put them? There they are. Continuing to decline and starting to pick up speed enough to go in whole hundred thousands now. So they went from 23.4 down to 23.3 over the course of last year in terms of million people on the island. And before I check chat again, we'll rush over to Europe to hit Belgium or Belgique. Let's see, you guys climbed up a bit from 665 up to an economic size of 689 billion. And population-wise, did I get Belgium on the sheet? I did not. Sorry, sucks to be Belgium. All right, anything else? Just someone new showing up, is that it? I would see super chat stuff most likely. I usually do see it on this side, but sometimes not. Okay, but why am I on this page? Need to be on this page. And yes, I will be doing like an actual video of the stuff. Well, it'll be much quicker read offs and more condensed. Oh wait, you can't use the graphs. Okay, man, I'm gonna have to try to speed run making those graphs then. Ireland continues going up bit by bit. They went from 577 up to 587 billion. Huge chunk of which is kind of concentrated in financial stuff, kind of similar to the UK. And in Ireland's case, a lot of it is also concentrated in pharmaceutical manufacturing. So it's not like evenly dispersed. Population wise, I did not get Ireland, but Ireland is roughly, I think at the moment, it's around 5.5 million, which is Ireland's an interesting case. Ireland back in the 1800s, before the potato famine, before mass immigration to the US, and before the brief semi conflict for independence with the UK, Ireland's population was actually higher in the 1800s than it was in present day. They were at 8 million at their height in the 1800s. They went all the way down to like 3 or 4, and they've gone up, wavered a bit, and gone up, slowed down, and are very slowly going up right now. But they've never gone back up to that 8 million number. Sweden, Sverige, is continuing to kind of run on idle, meandering around at about 600 billion. This time, over 2025, they increased. They went from 610 up to 620 billion for total economic size. I did not get Sweden's population change for 2025 on the sheet, but they're close to 11 million, somewhere around there, roughly. And then just after Sweden is someone whose population data I did manage to get in time, Argentina. Argentina is one of the ones who's been like wildly fluctuating all over the place. And this time the jump was upwards. Over 2025, they went back up from 633 up to 683 billion total GDP size. Population, in terms of population, where are they? There they are. In terms of population, after some revisions further down than initially it was believed for them to be, they went from 46.7 up to just above 47 million. And they're likely going to peak around 50 or maybe in the low 50s, like 51 or 52. Israel, I don't have the population data for, but they have exceeded 10 million. In terms of economic numbers, they've kind of hit a stall for the last few years, not like a multi-decade one, but the last few years they kind of been wobbling around between 500 and 600. You know, probably doing stuff is a decent part of that. But over 2025, they took an abrupt upward surge from 540 up to apparently 611 billion. And population wise, as I said, they're over 10 million, but I didn't write down their actual change for the year. Singapore, the island city state, continues its rather steady upward trajectory. They've maintained that similar to Taiwan. They went up this or last year by a bit larger than usual. Actually, they went from 547 up to 574 billion for total economic size, and a fair bit of that is because of electronics related stuff and semiconductor microchip manufacturing stuff that has been relocated from China and Taiwan, starting up over the course of last year, so that we get the desired global dilution of the supply. And in terms of population, Singapore naturally would be declining, but they do take in quite a lot of workers. They got people from Indonesia, they got people from Malaysia, and they even have they have Aussies there too, I believe. Population total, they still managed to go up, primarily again from taking people in over last year from 6.04 up to 6.11 million. Otherwise, if they were not taking in any immigration, they would be well on their downward slope by now. They would probably be below 5 million already. Uh, where oh, I have to flip these over. There we go. Who comes after them on the economic ladder? Österreich, Österreich, Austria. Uh, let's see, Austria has been fluctuating around like 500 or so. Last year, they went from 537 up to 559 billion for economic size. And population wise, I did not get their numbers, but I think they're around like 9.1 or 9.2 million, and they're about to level off. Then after them comes the UAE, another mass slave labor employer. The UAE saw a jump upwards from 537 up to 569 billion, in a decent part owing to the fact that they brought their oil production up from 3 up to close to 3.5 million over the course of the year, despite the price increases, and the fact that they are increasing the amount of stuff they refine and the degree amount of it that they export as refined end products. So I believe they increased that in 2025 by like 200,000 barrels per day, 200,000 more barrels per day than previously than in 2024 was exported as refined end products in 2025. So that's another part of their boost that they saw. Thailand, who is not at the moment at war with Cambodia, but that might restart at any time. They've been fluctuating around the 500s in big spikes in each direction, and they went from 526 up to 559 billion over 2025. Population wise, where did I put them? There they are. Population wise, they have increased their downward slope, and that is going to continue increasing for a bit. They went from just over 66, down to just above 65.8 million. And then, let's see, we'll do Norway and the Philippines. Then I will check chat again. And then we'll go for half an hour more, probably. And then I'm going to be, it's going to be too much for me to keep going. Norway has also been oscillating right around 500 or so for, I think, like a decade and a half now. So that's just where Norway's decided to hang out for the rest of time. And this year, or sorry, last year, they went back up from 484 to 517 billion. And I did not put down their population change numbers, but they're around, I think, 5.6 or 5.7. And then the Philippines, where my not blood related aunt was from. Aunt Lizzie, who was in the Air Force with my parents, is the one they would usually leave me with when they went away for any bit of time. The Philippines has gotten close to and dropped from 500 a couple times, and they're closing in on it again. We'll see if they make it. This time, they closed 2025 at a total economic size GDP of 492 billion, and for population, where's the Philippines? Where's the Philippines? Where did I put the Philippines? There they are. For population, they went from 113.9 up to 114.9 million people. So they did briefly reach a point where they were increasing by more than 1 million each year. They were going up by like 1.3. They're now down to an increase rate of like 1 per year already, as their fertility rate has undergone a very quick drop over the 2020s specifically. So with by like 2030 or the early 2030s, they'll probably be down close to only increasing by like 500,000 a year, maybe. Or it could not go down that fast, but we'll see. Okay, Philippines are done. Ethiopia. Those are all the same comments as before and are the same over here. All right. If anyone wants to say or ask anything, by all means, you can say it. Unless it's something that would get me demonetized or get you banned. Bangladesh, the gradually salinated and inundated country as saltwater intrusion continues. But for economic size, Bangladesh was going up through the 400s, crashed, going up through the 400s, crashed. Trying again now, seeing if they can get closer to 500. They've made it up now to 475 billion for total economic size. We'll see if they can make it past that. And for population, over 2025, they went from 172.4 up to 173.5, or just above 173.5. Vietnam is closing in on half a trillion. They went from 476 up to a total economic size of 491 billion over 2025. And population wise, they're going to be peaking in the 100 and teens. Currently, they are, where did I put them? There they are. Currently, they are at around 103. They went from around 102 or 102.1 up to 102.9 over the course of 2025. And that is going to be slowing down quickly as, let's see, downloads, population. They have not updated their pyramid in quite some time, so it is not the best one. But as of 2020, this was it. So move everything up further by 5 years, and they started basically going flats about 45 years ago. It looks like 40 years ago, but remember, have to add 5 years. So flat down, and now they're starting just below this. You would see them starting to indent as they're now down to 1.8 and are theoretically going down to, I think, 1.76 this year. So that's going to slip below some of the higher up outbound levels that are now also 5 years higher. And the we're about to hit pretty soon, because remember, move each of these 5 years up. So this sudden outward group here uh, is this sudden outward, like post World War II, post French Vietnam War, post U.S. Vietnam War outward boom is going to start hitting end of life expectancy. So that's going to abruptly slow them down. Malaysia, one of my personal favorites, always manufacture the best headphones. Oops, we broke it. We have to fix it. Okay, let's see. So you do that, then you do this. Nigeria, we'll get to Nigeria in a second. I think they're actually next. No. Oh, no, they're not next. I forgot how far down they are because their economy has crashed. They have like tanked themselves over the last few years. Okay, I'll jump over to them after Malaysia and then we'll resume the regular order of things. So Malaysia is continuing upwards. They've now made it up to $471 billion of economic size. So you guys will be crossing the half-trillion line very soon. And population-wise, Malaysia is slowing down, but still going up. They're probably going to peak at something like 37 or 36. Over 2025, they went from 31.4 up to 34.3 million. And then, since requested by a viewer, we will jump over to Nigeria. As I've been going through the countries in order of the economic ladder, and then also mentioning their population. But Nigeria had a has had a bad economic down spiral in recent years. Let me find them on here. Okay, Nigeria was actually close up to around half a trillion, but then they dropped and held off there. Looked like they were coming back up, then they dropped again and again. Got as low as only 189. They've rebounded recently and ended 2025 at 285 billion. But you know, that's decently short of the half trillion they were actually up to and doesn't go far amongst a country of 200 million plus. Regarding population, Nigeria is still closer to assumed numbers than people want to believe, because a lot of people want to believe in a lot of the super low population conspiracy stuff, but it is lower than most sites are going to tell you. Like, I've seen everything from like 250, 247, 241, and 237. Among the various numbers, the Nigeria is a case where the lowest number is the most likely. They went from about 227 and a half, or roughly 227 and a half, to a bit under 233 million. The number of people they increase by each year is still going up, but it's going to be hitting its peak. It is going to peak around like 6 million over the next few years and is going to head down quicker than initially assumed after that. However, remember, this is still going to carry them up by quite a bit because 6 million plus per year is a large number to work your way down from. But they are not going to like surge all the way up to a billion or 700 million people like everyone keeps insisting they are. They're going to peak in the 400 millions. Okay, back to the regular order of the ladder. Denmark has continued going upwards through the 400s. They went up from 429 up to 450 billion for their total GDP as of the end of 2025. Didn't get their population change numbers because, again, I was lazy, but they're around like 5.5 million. Colombia, for economic size, continues growing at a reasonable kind of linear pace. They went from 419 up to $438 billion. So, apart from things that might happen, they should reach half a trillion in a couple of years. In terms of population, uh, they finally they finally did some data revision and went back down from the assumed 55 after doing census stuff and surveys of various records and whatnot, and looking at a lot of ISAT images or whatever they're called. So they were able to recalibrate closer to reality, which was lower than expected, as has been the case. And they were around 53 million at the start of 2025, as opposed to the previously believed 50 or 55. They were at 53 instead, and went up from 53 to a bit below 53.4. And they're going to be peaking very soon, around like 56, maybe 57, because their fertility rate has already dropped down to only 1.1. They're one of the lowest in the Caribbean, along with Costa Rica, who's also at 1.1. Or sorry, not Caribbean, Latin America. As of this year, as of the start of 2026, it looks like Ecuador is at 1.5, Peru is at 1.6, Venezuela, in reality, not the numbers that they claim, but their real ones are like 1.3. Brazil is down to 1.4. Mexico is also down to 1.4 up there. Cuba is below 1, they're at like 0.9. And Chile came back up. They went as far down as 0.88, which is suspicious because that's a Nazi number. And, Chile is where a lot of the SS went to hide post World War II. But they've come back up from that. They're a bit back above 1 now. It's been 2 years since then. South Africa. Let's head over to South Africa. We got about 15, 16 minutes left before I'm just going to call it, unless I don't. And the longer I go, the higher the ad revenue goes, anyways. Let's see. South Africa was once up to, I think, like 600 billion at the highest. And they went down to like 400, 500, 400, 500. They've been all over the place, crashing and wobbling. And they contracted back down to 400 again, went down to only about like 370 something. I'll put a wiggly line there, but have rebounded over the last 2 years, apparently now ending 2025 at 426 billion for their total economic size. And for population, it looks like population wise, there were some potential revisions, and they went from 62.7 up to 63.5, and they're likely going to plateau around the lower 80s in terms of population. Who's after them? Romania. Romania has now exceeded 400 billion. They went up and over and have reached an economic size of 423 billion. And in terms of population, they are just dodging their downward slope that they would be doing with their neighbors for the moment, because of people returning to Romania because of Ukrainian refugees, and because their birth rate is not actually as bad as other places. They've managed to stay around 1.5 or 1.6, but their downward slope is coming. They went from a few tens of thousands above 19 million down to basically a flat 19 million or a few tens of thousands below 19 million over the course of 2025. After Romania, on the economic ladder at least, we have Pakistan, who may be eventually about to enter a major war with Afghanistan because the Taliban psychologically cannot handle life outside of endless jihad. Pakistan has been up there economically a few times, crashed, tried to recover, crashed, tried to recover, crashed. They've been doing the South Africa routine, and they crashed again down towards 300, recovered back up to 373 as of last year, or as of the start of last year, and as of the end of last year, start of this year, they've made it back up apparently to 410 billion. But again, that's spread amongst a very large population. So over 2025, they went from somewhere between 246 and 247 up to between 250 and 251 million. Sorry, I think I said billion when I said that. The first one, million people. The dollars were billions, the people is millions. You're going to see a lot of sites claiming that they're like already at like 260. Some of the slightly more reasonable ones will say they're already at 256 or whatever. They're likely right around 250, and they're not going up to a billion or 700 million either, just like with the Nigeria stuff. Pakistan's actually going to peak lower than Nigeria. They're going to peak in the 300 millions instead of the 400 millions because Pakistan, their birth rate started going down sooner than Nigeria, and it's slowed its decrease, but it is still going down. And as of this year, they're going to be at a flat 3 children per woman. Nigeria is still up around 4, but they're also on their way downwards. And let's see, don't have the latest population numbers yet because I was lazy, but Czech Republic, Česko, you guys economically are almost at 400, almost the same as Romania, despite only having half the population because Czechs are just that awesome. Czechs are up to 383 billion for economic size. And the population of Czech Republic is close to 11 million. It's somewhere most likely between 10.8 and 10.9. Again, they're kind of flat. And then below Czech Republic on the economic ladder is Iran, who was up close to half a trillion and has been on their way down. since we entered the 2020s, or really since the end of the 2010s. But as we've gone into the 2020s and the uprising situations have continued spiraling, they've gotten worse and worse. Iran is now down to, as of the end of 2025, before the events of this year even started, they're down to only 357 billion for economic size. And in terms of population, where are they? There they are. They increased from 86 up to 86.7 millions again, not billions for the people, millions. And the uprising and revolt situation in Iran has gone quite crazy over the last few days. For those of you who don't know, I'll cover this again in like the regular stream on Wednesday or Thursday. But it's now over 100 cities where the population is actively in combat against the security forces, and in some cases, in some of these cities, I think one of the better battles is going on in Isfahan, but I'm not positive. The civilian population has actually overrun several security points and has managed to seize the weapons and vehicles of the Revolutionary Guard. So it looks like, at least as of this moment, we're tipping more into the actual armed revolt level of things, as opposed to just mass protesting and rioting, lighting trash cans on fire. It looks like we're maybe this might actually be it. We're maybe transitioning into armed revolt against the regime. So we'll see how that pans out. And then Egypt, Masr or Misr. Uh, Egypt is continuing its economic decline. It got up close to half a trillion, but they've been on their way down over the 2020s and have declined down now to an economic size of only 349 billion. Their population, meanwhile, is continuing to go up, but the rate is continuing to decrease. Over 2025, they went from 108.1 up to 109.1 million people, and they are continuing to decrease as Egypt's fertility rate is all the way down to between 2.2 and 2.3, depending on who you ask. By the end of this year, it will probably be right at the replacement level. Let's check chat and be responsible. uh, because Pakistan doesn't actually have a high population density. It has a few cities, like in a lot of other cases, like for example, Nigeria, like cram 10 million people here, 10 million people here, 10 million people here, and 10 million people here. But then you have the rest of the country where people are living in not really modern conditions. And in fact, 2 million of those people are also living in actual slavery. And several tens of millions, the Baloch people, are being repressed by the Pakistani security forces because they want their independence, as do the Balochs in Iran, South Afghanistan. So, Balochistan right here is on the list of countries you're probably going to see come into existence in the not all that distant future. Let's see who, and part of the uh, remember the a lot of the birth rate stuff is the a fair deal of it is related to like industrial revolution and modernization type stuff and just access to condoms, which is why China's brilliant idea to raise their birth rate after all the other stuff that hasn't worked. If in case you missed last stream, China came up with a brand new idea. Just like everybody in the world taxes alcohol and cigarettes, China is going to implement like a super heavy, I don't know, 50% sales tax on condoms, and just hope somehow that that makes their birth rate go back up. I can't draw the confused laughing at you black dude meme because I'm not a natural artist. That's why the art for my would-be 2D animated series has to be drawn by Anya over in Belarus, who hopefully uh, she's told me previously she might be able to actually finally escape Belarus. Would probably be to Lithuania, Lietuva technically, but we'll see. So there's Pakistan's is going down. You know, it started going down because of the Industrial Revolution stuff, and is continuing to go down. Might even get dragged down further. We'll see. Primarily because of the social media advent, like finally starting to reach them as well. And if Pakistan, either A, gets into a large war with India, or has an internal fragmentation, that will even worsen the situation. Let's see. Egypt, Pakistan. Okay, where were we? Chile. I only have a few minutes left before I designated a time that I would arbitrarily end the stream at. So Chile, and again, sorry about the fake gray bars that are just algorithm extrapolations on these sites. They end up adjusting to real numbers once they input the data. But TD Economics has gotten really lax and tends to not input the data until June. And also, you can't go further back than 10 years because it's behind a paywall. I will try to get on making the regular nominal GDP graphs in the Google Drive free to access. I only have the inflation value adjusted ones, and I have to rework those anyways to adjust them over to 2026 from 2024. The population levels, you can just use my population projection graphs because those include 50 years of previous population as well. Let's see, who was next? Oh, yeah, Chile. Chile, and all those graphs are in the Google Drive folder, which is linked under the description of basically any video I've made in the last 2 years. That's all free to access at any time. Chile is gradually climbing up through the 300s. They ended 2025 at 347 billion for total economic value and population. Did I get Chile in time? Yes, I did. They are climbing up just barely. They're at the point where they're about to be rounding over, though, into a plateau and then descent. But they did do a sluggish increase from 21 or 20.1 up to 20.2 million people last year. And then Portugal only have the economic numbers on the sheet. And Portugal has gotten up into the 300s and has tried going up and stagnated and is now starting to succeed, making it up through the 300s, ending 2025 at 338 billion for total economic size. Population wise, they're around 10 million. Back over to Latin America, we have Peru, who economic size has now exceeded 300 billion. They ended 2025 at 303 billion for total GDP value. And for their population, they increased over 2025 from 34.04 up to 34.36 million. and they're going to be peaking and rounding out a bit higher than Malaysia. They'll probably get closer to 40. Anybody else? Finland, Suomi. For economic value, Finland has been at around 300 for a number of years. They've been kind of playing around there. This time they came in at 315 billion. And population wise, they have like 5 or 6 million. Not positive. One of my arbitrary favorites, Algeria. Algeria is continuing upwards over 2025. They went from 264 up to 288 billion. They did not really increase oil production by that much. So, and also the prices decreased. So a lot of this is from actual stuff. A lot of those factories we talked about a few years ago, manufacturing some Italian cars and manufacturing General Electric steam turbine generators. A lot of those have started up, and also they have increased their natural gas production as well. In terms of population, Algeria, where are they? There they are. Algeria continued going upwards from 47.1 up to 47.8 million. And they're going to peak in the upper 50s, closer to 60. Their fertility rate is down to around like 2.7, and by the end of this year, it's going to be at around 2.5. Next would have been Nigeria, but last, before I check chat again and potentially end it, unless I decide not to, is Hellas, Greece, who has not had the best economic time. I'm just going to draw general wacky squigglies for the last 15 years. But they went up over 2025. They managed to go up from 257 up to 282 billion. Their population, meanwhile, continues its decline. Let's see, where are they? There they are. They're continuing to go down. They went from 10.4 or just under it down to 10.24 million. So they dropped by a little bit less than 160,000. And actually throw in one more. Throw in Iraq. Iraq declined because the oil price declined from 280 down to 265 billion as of the end of 2025. But since they've now begun bringing stuff online and are probably going to end this year around 5 million BPD, they're probably going to see a decent jump upwards for the data at the end of this year. Population wise, let's see, where were they? There they are. So population wise, they finished better data collection and stuff. And initially, it had been assumed as of the start of last year that they were at around 46.5, but it turned out they were lower than expected. They were at around 46, around 46 or 46.1, and and also obviously found out that they're going up slower than expected, and their population increased to 46.6 million. Okay, nothing new from anybody. What about on this end? Nothing on this end either. All right. Okay, we'll go until live for 2 hours, I guess. Since we're almost at the bottom of this sheet, technically. New Zealand continues really slowly, snail crawling their way upwards. They went from 260 up to 263 billion total GDP, economic size of the country. Don't have their population data update because I was lazy, but they're somewhere around like 5.4, I think. Magyar, Magyarország, Magyarország. Yes, you're supposed to emphasize the third syllable, I think. I used to say Magyarország, but apparently it's Magyarország. Where did we get? Okay, Hungary had gotten up to around 200, kind of stagnated, but has resumed climbing upwards and is now at 240 billion economic size, while their population decline continues. They dropped by another 80,000 over the course of 2025 from 9.58 million down to 9.5 flat. Qatar in the Persian Gulf, in terms of economic size, stayed basically the same. They were at 223 at the end of 2024. At the end of 2025, they were at 222 billion. And there's roughly 3 million people there. A few hundred thousand of them are essentially slave labor, as is the tradition with the richer three or four Persian Gulf states, or five. I forgot Bahrain. Flipping over to the back of the page, Ukraine has managed to climb back up above 200, ending 2025 at 210 billion. Pre-war, they were at like 300, I think, and they went down as low as like 140 or 150, but they've been climbing back up from that. They're at 210. Population-wise, where do they come in? Right there. They dropped. They were at like I think 39 million when it started. They dropped as low as 32, and they've been gradually now starting to come back up as more people have continued returning, both of their own volition, and in some cases, other countries are starting to limit the stay levels. And there's some ambiguity because there's a lot of people who are there like some number of months, but then not there for other numbers of months. So where you draw the line gets kind of blurry, but they're back up closer to 34 million, roughly around that. But again, there's ambiguity. Who's just below them? Morocco, or Maroc is its regular name. They had a jump from 146 up to 166 billion for economic size. Did not get their population change data. Kuwait, where my dad once was for a number of months, or it might have been a year, I forgot. Kuwait stayed basically the same. They declined a little bit because of the oil price drop. It went from 265 down to 261 billion. And their population is like also about 3 million, or it might be 4, I think. Slovakia, or Slovensko. Let's see. You guys are continuing to make your way up through the 100s. You're all the way up to 147 billion for total economic size now. I did not get your population data update, but I think you're at around 4.5 million and very slowly decreasing. And I'll check both the clock and chat after Uzbekistan. But Uzbekistan, uh, a bit of questioning with these numbers. Supposedly, they apparently jumped from 101 up to 140. Not really sure about buying into that. But other secondary sources are claiming it was actually 101 up to 111. that sounds way more believable. So probably should roll with that one. Population wise, they are on, with the population pyramids, you see in a lot of these countries, they have like this. They're on one of the, on their like rebound outward bulges at the bottom of theirs. They came in at like I think 37.1 million at the end of last year, and are continuing to go up by significant numbers, as they are also the destination for people who flee Turkmenistan. B, people from Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan also go to Uzbekistan to work, and they're another destination for the continuing stream of Russians who decide to flee Russia, the ones that, you know, just get on paper deleted from existence, but they're conspicuously never actually accounted for or subtracted from Russia's population number in the official data. Uh, Uzbekistan went up to 38.3 million. Okay. And looks like there is nothing else from anybody. That is probably where I'm going to call it off. Other than maybe a few, we're breaking out of the actual descending ladder and just kind of doing random jumps. Ethiopia, it looks like went from 140 something up to 156 billion. Meanwhile, its population went from roughly, because there's some ambiguity, and they claim it's like 134 because they're trying not to acknowledge a lot of stuff that's happened, both deaths and refugee flight from the country. But they went from roughly 128 up to roughly 130 million people over last year. Whereas you'll see they themselves, along with a lot of websites, will claim somewhere between 134 and 137. Anyone else want to randomly jump to or throw in? Nah, none of you. None of you guys. Ghana, though, or Ghana, as they don't do the overdrawn out they don't go Ghana. Apparently, they say it like Ghana. Let's see. Ghana went continued its upward climb. They're up into the 80s now. They went from the 70s up into the 80s and ended 2025 at an economic size of 86 billion. Population wise, they went from 34.4 up to a flat 35 million. And then let's see, who else do we got? Let's roll up to Tunisia, the one who keeps almost running out of water right up until the last second. Tunisia finally starting to go upwards a bit again. It went from 53 up to 59 billion for total GDP. And population wise, they went from 11.85 up to 11.97 million people. And this is basically where they are plateauing. They seem to be plateauing off right around 12. Their fertility rate is already down to 1.4 and may even go below that this year. Anybody else I feel like adding? Oh yeah, random arbitrary favorites. Jordan, you guys you need to get it together a bit more. Still slug crawling upwards from 87 up to 89 billion. Population wise, Jordan is, I think, right around 11 million. But I didn't get their data before doing this. Oh, yeah, Somalia. I forgot. So I also, for some reason, I have a lot of Somali viewers. The countries in particular that I just, for some reason, have large numbers of viewers from seems like inescapably random. Somalia uh, is continuing to go upwards. In numbers, in nominal numbers, it's small, but I mean, in percentage, it's huge. This is like 10% per year, or 8 or 9. It went from 11 up to 12 billion in 2024. Over 2025, it went from 12 up to 13 billion for total economic size. Uh, and those numbers are in a few years after everything starts getting ready, once the first actual oil extraction begins, after all the setup is done, then like Guyana, those numbers are going to like suddenly boost up. But at the moment, what we're seeing is the underlying actual economic activity in Somalia and population. Somalia, let's see. After some better data gathering and revisions, Somalia was slightly lower than initially thought, as with many others. Also, after having revealed that their fertility rate had not just stayed at 6 children per woman for 30 years, it had, after the end of the Civil War, after it bounced back from the drop, it had already very slowly started going down. But now, over the 2020s, it has started dropping a lot faster. Like, it had taken all that time to go from 6.5 or something down to like 5.6, but it's only taken the last 5 years or so to drop down to a flat 5. So it turned out to be closer to 19 and went up to about 19.3 million over the course of 2025. And is there anyone else I feel like throwing in there? Probably not. Anybody else say anything? Uh, that would be a long, rambly response, and I've already been talking for 2 hours. So, unfortunately, I'm not going to answer that this time. Okay, I will try to do almost all of the, uh, we'll say, top 100 countries in an actual video format. Once I put those graphs together, which is going to take a little bit. Otherwise, the Iran water situation video is coming soon, and then the monthly oil production video, along with the regular stream stuff on Wednesday or Thursday. So I will see everybody.